Welcome everybody. I would like to thank you all for being here. Also would like to start our time together with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, we do thank you and praise you for the gift of your love as you have shown it to us in your dear Son Jesus, for every opportunity and every way that you give to us to show our thankfulness and praise to you for his great sacrifice for us, for the opportunities that you give to us to share the good news of your redeeming love with those around us. And today, as we talk about an important topic, and money in the church is something that your Son taught regularly about during his earthly ministry, we ask that your Holy Spirit would be upon us, that you would anoint my lips with your words for the benefit and the blessing of these who have come and those that they serve. Also ask that you would open our hearts and our minds to one another, our ears to listen, and that we can learn and grow in this area, which is a place where there is much room for growth in our country and in our church body and in our own personal lives. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so we're talking about money. Stewardship sucks is the topic that we're talking about. And I want to start right away by telling you, when I was thinking about this trip and this talk and talking about money in the church, I thought I knew what I was going to say. And then I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of rereading, and I ended up going in a completely different direction. So I learned a lot in preparing for this. I want to share some of that with you, and I'm looking forward to a conversation that we can have here towards the end of our time. Before we get fully going, though, I got a couple of lovely assistants in Joe and Nate, who are going to give you a piece of stationery. And if you would be kind enough to put your name and title, church and state, and your best email on that piece of paper, then we're going to collect them before the end. And one of the things I'm going to share with you is a mini stewardship library. I have 5 of the 6 books that I'm going to talk about in our talk today, and I'm going to give 5 of you one of these books, and the 6th person who's drawn is going to get my favorite book, which Amazon didn't have in stock, and I waited too late to order it, and so it's not here. So I'm going to have to actually probably physically mail that to you. So if you'd be kind enough to share that information with me, I'm also going to send an email out to everybody that has a bunch of references, Amazon links if you want to buy the books, and also has some of the digital resources that we're going to be talking about in our time together. And so, stewardship sucks. I love this quote from Luther. It's a great frame for our discussion today. I'm sure that many of you have heard it before, but it is said that he said people go through 3 conversions: the conversion of their head, their heart, and their pocketbook. And unfortunately not all at the same time. We can argue about which of those first 2 comes first, whether it's the conversion of the head or the heart that comes first. For Luther, it was a head thing, right? Because he knew of an angry God growing up in his tradition, and he had to kind of be reprogrammed in how he felt and thought about God. And so he went head, then heart, then pocketbook. I think in our context you could make it just as good an argument for it's the heart and then the head. Okay, so regardless of the first 2, I think we can all pretty much agree that last and 3rd conversion of the pocketbook is probably the most difficult and most painful for a lot of human beings. Because, like it or not, we love money in an unhealthy and in an unholy way oftentimes. And that's just the way that it is. It's the way that our world works. It's the way that we think. A lot of times, many people will value themselves based upon the size of their checkbook or their savings account or their investment account. And it's one of the ways that people measure self-worth or the worth of other people, and that's just a function of being a human being. Now, as we talk about this subject, we're going to begin with a bunch of data, some stats that I want to share with you, a little bit of information dense here for the first little bit of our talk. And we're going to look at stewardship statistics in our country, in our synod, and then also going to look at it in the secular realm before we start kind of diagnosing the problem. And so I'm going to reference a couple of studies. These are big national studies. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, which is at IUPUI, Indianapolis. They do a ton of research. They're super well funded by the Lilly Foundation, which is a huge blessing to the state of Indiana that everyone should be jealous of. Their endowment, last I knew, was something like $88 million, but that was before a lot of the stock market gains here of the last couple of years. And they are investing millions and millions of dollars every year into research and into the church. It's a great blessing. And they have this website, generosityforlife.org, which is a great place for you to go to see the national trends, to see trends in the church when it comes to stewardship or generosity. And one of the statistics that they lead off with is that in 2018, for the first time in our nation's history, less than half of Americans donated to charitable causes. I'm sure that many of you saw the news last fall that now less than half of Americans claim to be a Christian for the first time in our nation's history. So this statistic predates that. And I don't think it's a coincidence, because I think that if you want to see where someone's priorities are, probably the best place to look is their checkbook register. Not that anyone uses those anymore. Okay, look at their bank statement. See where they're spending their money and how much they're spending. That will tell you where their heart is. So the fact that, 3-4 years ago, before the pandemic, we already saw the number of people giving to charitable causes going down to less than half. And that's not religious charitable causes. That's any charitable cause. Okay? That's just an alarming statistic. And I say it's a testimony to where our nation is and where our priorities are. If it wasn't bad enough that the number of people who are donating to charity continues to go down, it's even more scary when it comes to giving in the church that we see the rates of people's generosity going down to the church at a faster rate even than what it's going down to in the secular realm. So and I love these stats here. 2000 is a good year for a benchmark. You got $1,107 was the average amount given to charitable causes, but that declined to just under $800 over 18 years. All right, that's about a 30% drop in the amount that those who are giving to the church are giving to the church. Okay, and it's not just churches. This includes the Jew, any congregation. Okay, so it's the Jews, the Muslims, the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses. So we have fewer and fewer people giving to church, and they're giving less to church. And the amount given to secular causes also went down, but only about 25%. So the amount that people are giving to religious causes is going down faster even than it is going down to secular causes. Another national study by the Lake Institute of Faith and Giving. Again, I got a reference there. I'll email you these links if you want to look at it for yourself. But this is another nationwide study that goes back for over 40 years, and this is a really hard thing. Okay, I was born in 79, okay, don't hate me, all right? I'm old for some and young to others in this room. It is what it is. But if we go back to the 1980s, half of the money donated to charities went to religious causes. And now it's just under 30%. 29.6% in 2018 is the number that they reported. So over my lifetime, approximately 40 years, the amount of money that's going to charity has gone down to religious causes by 40%. And at the same time, the giving to secular causes has gone up 40%. All right? Because they're still giving, they're just not giving it to the church. So the Humane Society, Planned Parenthood, all your favorite causes, is who they're giving their money to instead of giving it to the local congregation. And in one of the books that we're going to reference, I'm going to give away today, God and Money, which is a great read. You should read it. They note that 6 out of 7 American families give less than 2% of their income to the church. Those are those that are giving to the church. Okay? All right, so there's a snapshot of giving in our country. We're gonna transition now to looking at the Missouri Synod. I started with the U.S. stats first because we love to think that we're special in Missouri Synod, and we're really not. Okay, we're everybody else. We're like everybody else. The same demographic, the same economic trends, the same attitudes, the same fears that are affecting the giving in the rest of the charitable world is affecting us as well. Well, now I'm going to treat us special by actually looking at us. So if you take this 30-year period from 98 to 2018, we see a decrease of about 12% in giving to Synod. Now, I can't 100% put a lot of faith into these numbers. Okay, it does come from the Office of the President of Synod, the visitation report that they gave to the districts, and yet, but their number is adjusted for inflation. I don't know why the rest of us aren't smart enough to do math, okay, but it's a number that they adjusted for inflation, and I don't know how they adjusted it. I don't know what calculations they used. I don't know if they're using $2,000 or $2020 or $1980. I don't know how they came up with it, but that's what President Harrison shared with all of the different boards of directors for the districts around the Synod here in the last year, is this idea that it's gone down about 12%. Not as bad as the rest of charitable giving in our country, right? But I would say that it's not anywhere near a biblical standard. And so what I like to do is this fun little exercise. And you can do this exercise with your congregation, by the way. You can go to the census website and you can look up the per capita income for your area. And if you just take the per capita income and multiply it by the number of people in your church, that will give you a fairly accurate gauge of the gross income of your congregation. All right, so I took the reported membership of Synod at 1,861,000 people, multiply it by the per capita income of the United States. Again, we're everybody else, okay? And you come up with the idea that if we're average, and we are, the income of the people who go to our churches is about $63 billion. It's a lot of money. A tithe of that, $6.3 billion, is pretty easy math. Well, if we compare that to what the reported giving in 2018 was at about $1.4 billion, then we're getting a really accurate picture as to what the amount of giving in our Synod is. And it's right around 2%. Okay? So that's just math. Okay? And using accurate sources to do our math. I don't think it's a matter of argument or debate that if we use the biblical standard for giving, which the tithe is a pretty good one to go with, that we're not anywhere near where we should be as a Synod, as individual congregations. And that's a challenge for us. You know, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of symptoms in Synod for this lack of investing in the church. And if we were like the Mormons or the JWs and required a tithe, we would be looking for places to put our money. Okay, I might not have a job at the Lutheran Church Extension Fund because congregations wouldn't need to borrow much money. All right? We wouldn't have a trouble finding people to work in the church because they wouldn't be making half. Our teachers would be making, in many cases, half or less than half what a public school teacher makes in the same community. All right, our seminary-trained pastors, we love the seminary education. I'm seminary educated, graduated from Fort Wayne in 2007. Love it. But take what our pastors make and compare it to other people who have a 4-year master's degree, it's a little bit of a crying shame. You know, I as a pastor, again, 2007, ready to take on the world, you know, took on a call, making just over $40,000 at the time, okay? And I can tell you my student debt from the seminary, because we were pretty responsible, was about 1.5 times my annual salary. My student debt payment, financed for 25 years, was over half my mortgage payment. All right? That doesn't, I just don't think that's honoring those who have left lands, homes, mothers, fathers to do the Lord's work, right? But that's where we are. Why? Not because God hasn't given us the resources, but because we're not investing the resources God has given to us in His church to do the work of His church. These are just symptoms. These aren't the problems. These are symptoms of a bigger problem, which lead to other problems, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So, you know, again, this is a little bit of a repeat stat, but the idea that the giving to religious causes is going down faster than it is to secular causes. And this next little point here was a little bit of an eye-opener, a little bit of punch in the gut for me, all right? That, you know, Peter Singer, he's renowned agnostic, atheistic thinker, philosopher guy, one of the most outspoken critics of the church, okay? He, through the power of reason and logic, which is his God, deduced that the world is better off if he retains less of his money and donates it to charitable causes. And so we have a guy who has no God in his life, just through the power of the human mind, reasons that the world is better off if he gives away more of his income. And so he donates annually 20 to 25% of his income to charitable causes. There's a lot of us that are trying really hard to get up to 10%. And once we get there, celebrate that we're doing what God has asked us to do. And here we have one of the greatest, most outspoken critics of the church giving 1/4 of his income away just because he recognizes the world is a better place if he gives instead of keeps. That's phenomenal. I will send a link to his TED Talk. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Watch the YouTube video. It's very powerful. So we've talked a lot of stats. I've shared a lot of numbers. I want to open it up for a little bit of conversation here, and ask you why our stewardship sucks. If anyone wants to be brave enough to venture a thought, and because we're being recorded, I'm going to repeat what you said. I'm not going to put your name, state, and church address in the recording. I'm the only one that gets tagged with all this. Yes, sir.
I think it's just the word stewardship. I've been stewardship chairman at my church for a few years now. As soon as you say the word stewardship, it has a connotation. Oh, here we go with the money.
Okay, so stewardship
right off the bat,
itself has a bad connotation.
It might be better to call it something else.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, maybe it's better to call it something else, which some have tried.
To accept the fact that everything you have, everything you own, is from God.
Okay.
So, if you accept that premise, why do people think, well, all I have to do is just volunteer for things at the church? And I give to a couple of other charities. So, and the other thought that I had was, I really firmly believe that if people believe in the cause,
okay,
they trust the people that are running it, and they know their money's going to be well spent, I don't think the church does enough to sell the fact that what God's work with, saying, give us the money, and then we'll figure out what to do with it.
So
figure out what we're going to do with it first to attract people.
Okay.
I want to support.
So I'm hearing a couple of different thoughts. I'm hearing there's a communication issue, there's an understanding issue, a teaching issue. There may be a heart issue, and you also identified a planning issue. So you identified 4 different issues with stewardship. Any of the 4 are valid valid reasons as to why our stewardship sucks. Yes, sir, in the back, who will not be named.
Then I think what it comes down to is, one, we don't truly understand stewardship, and I think one of the sad realities is that stewardship is not taught in the seminary.
Okay, so we don't understand it, and it's not taught to what it should be. Okay, to our teachers, our pastors, our preachers. Okay, two valid thoughts. I got here and then here. Yeah.
So I grew up in a church, and the common phrase there was church gyms and church schools, used by the young and poor and paid for by the old and the rich.
Church gyms, church schools, paid for by the old and rich and used by the young and poor.
Yep.
Yeah, there's some truth in that.
We always had alignment issues between who had money.
So the whole alignment, which I think goes back to the organizational planning piece, right? And maybe even the mission piece. Yeah, there's a great story in one of the books that I'm going to give away, where that exact thing played out, and it's very well. I loved it reading it, because I've lived through it as a guy who, my first parish was the youth guy, right? And so that we want young people in the church. We want them to be in study, but when they leave a mess, that's it, right? You can come on our terms, but the moment it becomes an inconvenient, or something gets broken, or there's a pile of dishes in the sink, that's it. You got to get those people in line, right? That's a hard place to be. Yes, miss.
Yeah, I think kind of my more emotional argument too is when I really struggled with stewardship was when I was like, what? I make so little. How can I even get by? Like, I have so much debt. I have so much I have to pay for, and then it was almost like a burden to give to the Lord.
Yeah.
Because it was like, okay, I'm already the poor person that needs
right.
help, so that was my emotional struggle.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit, not about your specific, but other people who are struggling with that same thing, because it's a hard thing, especially when we're stretched. Mm-hmm. And I think for workers who are called to lead, when we saddle them with unnecessary or unruly financial burdens, boy, we're really handicapping them to be leaders when it comes to this topic. And did I see another hand over here? Yes.
So, I work for a nonprofit. I'm a fundraiser.
Okay. Professional fundraiser in the room, everybody.
Church.
Right. Okay.
So, one of the things I think is, and it comes down to what I found in our church, I'm the president of the church council, is communication.
Communication. Okay.
Number one, we don't only ask once a year.
Okay, so you okay, and we're going to get to stats on that. One time a year, we make the ask.
Right.
And you don't do that professionally.
No.
You ask more than once a year.
Yeah.
That's weird. Go ahead.
And then the other thing is, I ask in church too, more than once. I'm the president of the council. So the other thing though too is you said investing in it, right?
Yeah.
We flipped it with that, and we're investing in Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing is you have to give out a shareholders report. What did you do?
Okay,
once we started doing that, more people were like, okay, it's not going to this black hole. But they don't know where it goes.
Called the church budget or the building committee or whatever.
Yeah, those ones are not fun, but they still need it. So
Yeah.
We've had great luck with, when we put when we're working on a mission or something like that, or the money's definitely going towards this. I mean, people give more than we need.
So your church in the communication piece not only makes the request, but then tells the people what their money did.
Correct.
What a weird idea. Another hand? Yeah.
Maybe our household dynamics have changed, so now instead of having a full intact family, we have a single mother.
Okay.
So we have a one-income family joining
Right.
the church, and then maybe the other half is non-existent.
Yeah. So.
They belong to a different church.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the split family causes a whole different set of issues potentially. Yeah. Last thought. Go ahead.
I just want to piggyback off what he said. A previous church we attended did a phenomenal job. Every single week they would tell you how you're
Every week.
Yeah.
They would have a video.
Yeah.
That's outside the route. It was a bigger church, so they had the resources to do that. But even
really
if it was just a
encouraging.
verbal update, you could see.
You could
pictures,
see what your money was
exactly.
doing.
You knew, unless they were really spending the money that was given, they couldn't do those things.
Okay.
So that was, I think, put a lot of people at ease.
Okay.
Seeing that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Last thought. Yes.
Is it true? I mean, I'm not a minister, why is stewardship not taught in the seminary? Because the minister has to be such an integral part of that.
So the question is, why is stewardship not taught? I would say, not defending the seminary, that they would say that it's taught in everything. Sometimes when you teach it in everything, you don't teach it at all. Okay? So, it's room for improvement. That's all I'm going to say. There's room for improvement there.
One of the things
It's
I'd like
not
to
a-
add, and I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey, and I think one of the reasons why people are not in a position to give, especially when they're younger, I was in the same position. I was never taught how to handle money.
Okay.
And you're not going to pick up.
Yeah. Yeah, you teach yourself bad habits more likely. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so there's room for teaching financial responsibility.
Number one, I think we have done stewardship a disservice because stewardship equated in most people's mind is only money. We don't
Okay.
attach it to time and talent.
Right.
Yes.
So when people hear the word
Stewardship.
so we're teaching a full
Yeah.
stewardship.
Okay.
And then the other thing, probably get myself in a little bit of trouble. I think historically within our church body, we've emphasized justification so much. I'm free.
You don't have to do anything.
My sanctified
Right,
life to come out.
right. Yeah. And the Lutheran Church has argued about this since the first generation of the Lutheran Church, right? There was the antinomians who said if you told the Christians they had to do anything, you were a heretic, right? We love words like anathema and damned to hell, and our Lutheran confessions are full of that stuff. Shocker that thread continues today in how we talk to each other. So, all right, I'm gonna take it to the next step here. I personally believe that it is a faith issue and a fear issue. Okay, that is the root cause. The reality is that we are so afraid to talk about money that the one time a year that we talk about money, in most cases, we apologize for it. Who looks forward to the talk when you were 12 or 13 years old with mom or dad? Huh? The birds and the bees. That talk.
Still waiting.
Okay, still waiting for it? If you haven't figured it out yet, no hope for you, my friend. When we do talk about stewardship once a year, how often does it feel like the birds and the bees? We're apologetic about it. We dance around it. We pretend like it's a not issue, but if it's not an issue, why are we talking about it? We do a tremendous disservice to our people, and no wonder they think it's a dirty word in church, because we treat it like a dirty word in church when we get around to talking about it, if we get around to talking about it. And I think it's because we fear, even as the pastors, as the teachers, as the LCEF district vice presidents, talking to people about money, because we know that many of them worship their money. Mammon, right? It's a heart issue. We all wrestle. I think that every single one of us wrestles with every single heart issue to differing degrees. All right? And we are so fearful of the idols of other people that we don't want to dare risk exposing or confronting them. And so we, who are called to do exactly that, end up doing a disservice. And I think end up worshiping the same idol by being afraid to even talk about it. All right? So it's a fear issue. It's a lack of faith. It's a lack of actually believing the promises of God. When He says, try me at this, test me at this, next week, next month, next year. Okay? So I personally believe that it is a heart issue, and I love this depiction of Jesus reaching down to Peter, okay, pulling him out of the Sea of Galilee, because it's light, it's bright, and it's hopeful. So many times we see this depiction of Peter and Jesus walking on the sea, and Peter's 3/4 of the way under, or he's all the way under, and it's dark. It's scary. This is bright, because even though all of the statistics say we're going in the wrong direction, and I have no good reason to believe that we're going to right this ship, I am hopeful that God Himself is able to pull us out of the dark abyss as individual Christians, as individual pastors, as DCEs, as leaders, to bring us to the light of His love to warm our stone cold hearts to Him, replace those hearts with a heart of flesh, so that there is hope. Because if you look for hope in the demographics, you're a lost cause. Okay, our source of hope is Christ and His redeeming love. The idea that He actually brings life out of death and light into darkness. So I'm excited about this subject because I believe in He who is able to make all things new. And so there is hope for us as individuals, for our congregations, and even for our synod, believe it or not. Because God is still at work in His Word, transforming and changing lives and conforming us to the mind of Christ, even if we don't see it in ourselves or feel it in ourselves or see it in others. And so I want to encourage you with 3 stories, real stewardship stories, to hopefully give you a little bit of courage and a little bit of gumption and gusto to go out of this room ready to ask people for money in time and talent and treasures and all that they have, okay? So this is a personal passion of mine. One of my classmates from seminary, Iowa farm boy, Dennis Meeker, he met through one of the Kenyan students at the seminary, a native Kenyan woman, and he is a crazy man. We're sitting there having coffee in the Commons one day, and he says, Dan, I'm going to marry Lorna. Okay, this is a woman that he had only emailed and phone called and never seen before. And I'm like, what are you talking about, Dennis? You don't even know this woman. He says, yeah, she's a good Christian woman. I'm going to go marry her. He said that they're not going to let me take the fall or the winter quarter off, the wisdom of the seminary. And they said I shouldn't marry her, but he bought a one-way plane ticket, a wedding dress, and a wedding ring, and went to Kenya and married this girl. Wow. Okay? And he got a call to Kenya, and they were serving in Kibera slum, which is the largest slum in Africa, 1.1 to 1.3 million people in abject poverty. And they had kids that were just living in their house. They had over 30 kids living in their house, and they decided that we needed to start a school so we give these kids an education, so we can get them out of this environment. And so they bought a farmer's field in 2011, a farmer's field with 2 steel buildings on it, 11 kids. We started this school. And this is just a part of the campus now. We've got a 3-story school building. We've got a 2-story dining hall, lecture hall, chapel. We got a high school that's been built now. And I was very blessed to be. I'm still on the board. I was the president of that organization for 8 or 9 years. And we have one other lover for Kenya's kids back in the background, TJ. I actually drug him to Africa one time with me to install some water treatment. That is your photo. It is your photo. This is when we climbed the water tower, and I won't tell people, never mind. Someone was scared. Very, very scared.
It's about time you admitted it.
I'm pretty sure
That's where I learned about faith.
the question was, do you think this is built to hold somebody my size? So he made me go first, but we got to top the water tower. We got an excellent picture. So we now have over 750 students at this school, and I have seen millions of dollars flow into this ministry from the United States, and we've sent over 98% of the cash donated to the organization to this school. And in this environment, we're able to educate a kid, give a kid a Lutheran education, clothe them, feed them, medicate them in a proper way, and get them to church every single week for $150 a month. $75 to $150 a month. You know, so for the cost of one teacher in America, we're able to educate entire classes of kids for the year and provide for all their physical needs. And it's an amazing thing. But for me, you know, it's just been amazing to see what God does there and how He has provided for that ministry. And it's great. It is a tremendous encouragement to me, because when Dennis asked me, hey, Dan, listen, we need to get this 501c3 thing going and I want you to lead it. I said, Dennis, listen, I am not your guy, okay? I'm going to give it 2 weeks, and we're going to ask for people to serve on a board. And if we get 6 individuals to serve on a board, and we listed all the positions, then we'll do it. Okay, and God provided, and He has continued to provide to this day. So that has been a wonderful testimony to me of God's work in the world. This story comes from a capital campaign, and it really is an encouragement. If For Kenya's Kids is an encouragement to communicate the good that God is doing through your ministry, that's the whole point of that story, and the power of that. Just being willing to ask. Okay, you don't know what you don't know. I think all too often we are so afraid that we just don't even make the ask to our people. Okay, so I was working with the Capital Campaign Company, not ours, that was working with the Catholic Church in Indiana, and the Capital Campaign consultant, who I know personally, was sitting down with the priest and said, is there anybody even remotely connected to this church? I'm not talking members, I'm not talking school parents, remotely connected to the church that might have the means to give a significant contribution to this campaign. They were trying to raise about $2.5 million to build a nice new entryway to their church. And he said, so-and-so, I don't know, but I know the story. So their former business manager, who was a very faithful Catholic woman for her whole life, had a friend in Texas. Okay, they never got married, but she got reconnected with this guy, and so she was flying from Indiana down to Texas about every other week. Well, sadly, she got cancer and she died after a couple of years of this very close relationship. They had a beautiful relationship. We're never married, never engaged, none of that stuff. But the priest said, I think Bob he loved her. It's worth just asking. So she just randomly sent a letter. Gets a contact from Bob in Texas, who's not Catholic, by the way. I don't even know if Bob's Christian. And he says, okay, what are you trying to do? Explains the project. What are you asking for? Give me your ask levels. And so she just sent him the top 12 things. Okay, and the number one thing was to name the entry to the church after somebody for measly sum of about $850,000. About 2 weeks later, the priest got a letter from Texas and opened it up, and inside is a check for $850,000. Never been to the church, no connection with the church except for this woman that he loved, and God was able to use that to make that dream for that church come largely to reality. He gave about a third of what was needed to pull the whole campaign off in one donation. You don't know if you don't ask. And so I want to encourage you to not be afraid to ask, even if it doesn't make any sense. And this last story is a personal favorite of mine. So I tell churches all the time. So in my role, if you read my biography, I work with the 2 non-geographic districts. So I have no borders on my work. I can go anywhere and talk to anyone and get in trouble for all of it. But when I work in situations, I get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, the best of the best and the worst of the worst. On Thursday, I'm going to be meeting with 2 different churches. One is how are we going to close our church well? The other one is what do we got to do to build a Lutheran school from scratch, starting brand new? So the goods and the bads and the uglies. I say when God works, everybody wins. Everybody wins when God works. So there was this old guy I got to meet in my congregation, just great, faithful, salt of the earth guy. He had a little excavating company, and he was on the building committee for the first church that I served at, Redeemer Lutheran Church in Seymour, Indiana. Great place, love those people, they're phenomenal. Well, he's on the building committee, and they're building the hole for the church. And he's seeing all these quotes from these other excavators for thousands of dollars to dig a hole for the church. And he just said, don't worry about it. He said, I'm going to do it free of charge. So one day after work, he loads up his backhoe. They drive to the church. He digs the hole. He's got his dump trucks there. He's a savvy businessman. The dump trucks didn't take it back to his gravel pit. They took the sand that he dug at the church to the local highway department that was building an interchange for an interstate highway, sold them the dirt, so he dug it for free, sold the dirt to a project, and after he was done, wrote a check for the proceeds that he sold the dirt for So not only did the church not have to pay anybody, but he actually paid the church to dig the hole. And you know what? He loved it. He was really made for this work, and he was incredibly blessed. His kids were raised in this church, and so for him it wasn't a thing at all. It actually was pure joy to do this for the church. And so you never know who God's going to use or how he's going to use them, but when you just talk openly and honestly about the need and what we're trying to do and explaining what God is going to do through this ministry, it is you can't even fathom how God's people are going to respond. So so for us to be encouraged to just go ahead and ask, not knowing what God is going to do, I think a big part of the reason why Satan is winning when it comes to finance is because he's got us so afraid of rejection, which if you ask, you're not losing anything, you got nothing to lose, right? That we don't even ask, and we're suffering as churches for that. All right, so a couple of great statistics. Got to thank one of my coworkers here who sent these to me. We're LCEF, Lutheran Church Extension Fund. We talk about money all the time, right? People see us as the the free drink people and the people who have all the money. So we have a good program, consecrated stewards, that we've been doing for decades, and we've seen some really great results from it. Okay, I'm gonna asterisk this right now and say part of the reason why we've been seeing such great results isn't because it's that awesome of a program, but it's because it's such low-hanging fruit, because churches straight up don't talk about money. So the first time you see this huge response. Okay, it is a good program, but I think it's low-hanging fruit. So on average, the churches that done consecrated stewards year one see a 23% increase in their annual giving year over year. Okay, for the 40.3% that report on that. Year two, it's a 3-year program if you want to do all 3 years. We see an average of a 17% increase. Okay, but that's not just 17%, because if you did year one and you saw a 23% and you see a 17% increase on 123%, that's a 44% increase in giving. All right, and then by year 3, again, we see a little bit of a diminishing return, but that 14% translates to about a 64% increase in annual giving for churches that did consecrated stewards year 1, 2, and 3. Think about how much that changes a ministry. 64% more income just for having the annual stewardship drive and talk. Okay, that's the difference between $100,000 and $163,000. It's the difference between $1 million and $1.6 million. All right? I don't know how big your churches are, how much money you work with. That is transformational increase in annual giving. Okay? It has its limitations. It is a program. All programs are limited. So what I'm going to do with the rest of our time is I'm going to ask my 2 lovely assistants to pick all the papers up, please. And I want to give you some stuff that you can actually use in your ministry. So, going back to one of our big national surveys, 76% of congregations talk about money once every 3 months or less often. All right? There are 9% of congregations in America who talk about giving on a weekly basis. And of those 9%, 90% have seen an increase in contributions over the last 3 years. Now, if they're doing this, they're doing it well. I went to a church in Florida this last weekend. I know. It's terrible. Guy from Michigan was in Florida one weekend and he's in Phoenix this week. It's so weird. They did a great job. Offering was right up front in the worship service. And they began their worship service by inviting all 30 of their Stephen ministers up front. So anyone who needed someone to walk with and talk with through life stuff could see who in the church had been trained to get the help they received. But the pastor who was in charge of their ministry, this ministry, also explicitly connected the work and the training that those people received to the week's offering. And so anyone who was giving through the app, offering plate, whatever, knew and could see exactly what they were contributing to. And this church is a great growing congregation where people are, they're not just growing numerically or financially, but they're also growing. I mean, they had over 2/3 of their average worship attendance, sign up for weekly Bible classes a week ago. I mean, they're on fire. And I think a part of it is because the people can see very clearly on a weekly basis what my $5 bill is gonna do for somebody else. So encourage to make that connection, to communicate what the giving is doing when the offering is taken. So, I learned this. I was very blessed to serve in a couple of wonderful congregations. The first one, at the offering, we always said a prayer before the offering was taken so that it was explicitly an act of worship. And so that was how we communicated in that congregation. My second congregation, where I was the senior pastor, I had a little bit more freedom to do what I wanted to do. And we would do an annual contribution campaign. Okay, fall generally is a good time to do that. And we also would share in the pre-service slides pictures of what was happening in the school, what was happening in the church. The dad who was baptized with his son. Because they're all joining the Lutheran church and joining the church. Dad had not been baptized. So the people could see what I got to see on a daily basis that people who weren't there didn't get to see most of the time. So we put it on the slides, we communicated it, we shared, and there was a season, I would say, for about 3 years where we did it the best, where we had quarterly communication from the church, so people would make a commitment. And then we actually had a wonderful laywoman who was trusted with everyone's commitments and everyone's giving information, so that she would send a quarterly update. This is what you promised to give. This is where you're at. And just a note, a reminder. Oh, and by the way, these are 3 things that happened in the last 3 months at our Shepherd. And we saw giving go up double digits every year that we did that, as a percentage of giving. Because people could see it. As the senior pastor of the church, when we send out the annual giving statements, I personally signed every single one. Had 1,000 members. That's a lot of giving units. And I wrote a personal note to Bob and Shirley, to TJ and Tommy, and to Andy and Kateri, and everyone that I knew, because they cared enough to invest in the church. By golly, as a senior pastor, their senior pastor, I could give them 15 seconds to put a wet John Hancock on a piece of paper and tell them, I love them, I'm praying for you, I'm so glad that Susie was baptized, I'm so glad that I got to sit with you when your dad died. Thank you for inviting me into your life. Thank you for inviting Jesus into your life. It took me a couple of days and a horrendous writer's cramp. Absolutely worth every minute. And you know what? Not only was it worth it because we saw the financial return, but that also demonstrated my openness to them, and I got a lot of feedback that happened. And it was funny because people knew that someone was watching, so people thought I was watching. And so I would have people come up to me after church and say, Pastor, listen, I'm sorry, I didn't give my tithe last week. I'm going to do 2 next week. I didn't know who was giving how much, okay? I did know who our top 20 giving units were, okay, because I thanked them personally, but I didn't know exactly what they were giving. But they all thought I did, and there's a little carrot and stick there too that is okay. So some things that I want to share with you, books. This is the one that I don't have. I'm going to recommend 6 books. None of them are published by CPH. Okay, if your conscience can't handle learning from a non-Lutheran, you can just go ahead and walk out that door now. But they're in my experience are great encouragements for different reasons. And so, the first one is Rich Church, Poor Church. It's about 12, 14 years old. It was written by a guy who spent his life as a fundraiser for congregations and nonprofits. And there is so much good in this book that I recommend you to read it, your pastor to read it. I actually went through this book with my board and my elders. I found it so impactful as we were framing how we were going to talk about money in our church. Okay, there's a lot of great tools to use. He emphasizes communication. He emphasizes doing things the right way, personal attention from the pastor. He does advocate the pastor knowing who gives how much, which I personally didn't practice in my own pastoral ministry, but there's a lot of good stuff here, and I think it really helps us to frame a talk about stewardship in our congregations. The next one is God and money. This one is really, really good for lay people. I would say for like a small group or a Bible class. Maybe, again, your leadership team or your staff to go through it. It's an easy read. Here it is. The subtitle is How We Discovered True Riches at Harvard Business School. All right. It's the one thing I want to share with you because it introduced me to the 3 S's. When we think about people and money, we normally think about the 2 S's. Spenders and savers. Okay? 90% of my premarital counseling with my soon-to-be newlyweds in my parish ministry was your spenders and savers. Which one are you? And generally, there was always a spender and a saver in every couple, right? They introduced a 3rd S, which really shouldn't be a surprise, servants. And they share real-life stories of people who decide to give extraordinarily of their earthly resources. You know, some really weird concepts like once we make a certain amount of money, we're going to give all the rest to charity. Okay? What can my family comfortably live on? $150,000. We're going to give everything above that to charity no matter how much we give. What a crazy idea. And tithing all the way up to that point. You know, some really practical ideas that you can share with your folks in that God and Money book. The next one is the spirituality of fundraising. I've read this probably 3, 4, 5, 6 times. I read it on an airplane last week in 33 minutes. Okay, I've read it 4 times, all right? But it's a super easy devotional read. It's a great read a few pages, set it down, go for a jog, go for a walk, drink beer, drink coffee, do whatever you do when you're thinking. Okay, but it's a great book. And Henry Nouwen's a phenomenal author. Not Lutheran, but he's still, by God's grace, an awesome teacher. The Paradox of Generosity is a little bit more academic, but man, they do a great job of profiling like 13 case studies in generosity and showing how generosity pays. Like the relational, the economic dividends of being generous with other people is well documented in this book. So if you don't want to be generous because it's a good idea and it's good for your soul and it's good for your heart and Jesus says so, read the research that says it's actually good for your soul, it's good for your heart, it's good for your cholesterol level, your blood pressure, it's good for your number of friends, it's good for your opportunity for economic advancement, it's good for a lot of stuff to be generous with other people. It's a great read. A little bit longer, a little bit denser, but again, well worth the time. You know, this is another really easy read. David Green, the founder of Hobby Lobby, giving it all away and getting it all back again. You know, his company stood toe-to-toe with the federal government with a risk of being fined $250,000 a day if they didn't comply with the whole health care scheme that was proposed by a previous administration of the U.S. government. Easy read. And this guy, I mean, he's built the Bible Museum. He's invested in some really great Christian causes. It's worth thinking about how we're going to invest what God has given us. And then Dave Ramsey, I know a lot of fans of him here. If you're in a stewardship talk, you're probably a fan. But leaving the legacy journey, I like as we think about how we can leave a lasting legacy. You know, it's a conversation that I get to have in my role with a lot of congregations as they're trying to figure out what comes of who we are and what we are as God apparently sees fit that this congregation no longer exists in this community sometimes. It's a hard conversation to have, but boy, it sure is nice to have it 20 or 30 years before you get to the point where you have to close the place, because you can do some really phenomenal things. Just like if you make a will and invest properly, you're going to do better than if you wait until you die to make plans. Wait a minute. Okay. Contagious generosity, it's worth a read. It's not my favorite, but it's okay. Again, probably good for a leadership team, church staff, whatever. It's okay. So back to where we started. The 3 conversions, right? Head, heart, pocketbook. It's something that we're going to get to struggle with until Jesus comes back. It's an area where we all have room for improvement. Okay? You know, I teach my kids the 10-10-80 rule for personal finance. God gets the first 10%, invest 10%, live on 80%. All right? Who do you trust more? Yourself with 100% of the income God gives you, or God with 90%? Life says most trust themselves better than God when it comes to that. And I also personally, I don't see the tithe as the goal. I see it as the starting point for Christian stewardship. You know, it took me years to get there as an adult human being. But by God's grace, we've made it. And sure is nice to be able to feel good about what you're supporting and what you're doing with your funds while you're frittering away the other 90%. Or 88 or whatever the percentage is, you know. So I mean, I did not want to take the whole 90 minutes. Y'all got sore butts, I'm sure, and I want to leave some time for conversation. So if anyone has any questions or thoughts, or yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned the 10-10-80, and I teach second grade. The other day we had the story of the widow's mite.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking to second graders, and you know, we've read the whole story, and that was great. But then I said, you know, I always taught my kids, you know, 10-10-80. You give 10% to God, save 10%, and you get the rest. And then I say, so if grandma sends you a $10 bill in the mail, how are you going to,
Yep.
you know, divide up? They thought that seemed reasonable or whatever. And I just think that, like with our confirmands, we always give them church envelopes.
Yeah.
We don't really give them the instruction.
Yeah.
So you're talking about educating adults, but we really need to start when they're little.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's. You're right. You got to. If I tell people, you know, young families to bring their kids to church, because if you're bringing them to church when they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I have a personal problem with children's church. You know, don't take them out of church. Let them do that. It's their normal. And if they're learning how to do this when they're in second grade, when they're 22 or 102, it's just what they're used to doing. You know, when they're young, we're quite literally forming them, right? Their brain is being wired. They're developing lifelong habits. So I commend you for your work, and thanks for just teaching those kids. It's super important. Yes, sir.
I think when we were talking earlier just about some of the struggles, the two words that come up, and you've hit on them, I think, to one degree or another, is the difference between transactional and transformational giving. Mm-hmm. We live in a transactional world.
Yes.
I give you this, and you give me something
right.
in return. And that's not to speak down against saying, here's what we do with your money. I think it's really important, but it can become very transactional.
Right.
I only give because... And who was it that that said it might have been I can't think of his name now, but stewardship is not the need of the church to receive; it's a need
of the giver to give. Right.
That it's understanding the transformational nature of it is God. Well,
and God is a giving God, a creative God, right?
Right.
And so when we live into what He's called us to be, and we are again conformed to the mind and the image of Christ by the power of the Holy Spirit, we are transformed to be givers, and it's a part of who we are. You know, generationally, if you're 40 to 45 and above, you will give to the church, the place you went to college. You will give to institutions and write them basically a blank check because you believe in the mission of that institution. But when it comes to anyone 40 to 45 and below, they need to know what their giving is doing. Yeah. And so there's a balance there, but both are good. But either way, we're encouraging them to do what God says is good for them to do anyways, right? Yeah. We're just encouraging them to be who God has called them to be and to grow in that, which is, I'm sure, what we strive to do every day. Yes, sir?
And that's the teaching about why we do stewardship. Right, because your point about seeing where the money goes is great, for building passion for those things. But you also have the group of people that are like, what is the church doing with my money?
Yes.
Right. And when we give, well, if you look back in the Old Testament, they used to burn it up. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I remember sermons I've heard where it says, what we're going to do this week is we're going to take our donations and burn them up. And we didn't actually do that, but, the gasps. So it's not about the money, it's about the relationship of the giver to God.
Yeah, I love the Holy Land. I go there. I've been there 5 times. I'm going back in January, God willing, of next year. Trip's open for anybody that wants to go as a rostered church worker or a spousal rostered church worker. So talk to me later if you want to do that. But super great deal, by the way. $2,150 approximately. I'm excited because as a young pastor, I got to go, and my life was completely transformed by this thing. And to be able to go for a week and have everything paid for like $2,000, are you kidding me? So yeah, and TJ's going to go with me to Israel for the third time. Fourth time. Whoa, we're getting old, you and me. It's weird. Anyways, the difference between the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. Okay? If you go up to the Galilee, it's, 600 feet approximately below sea level, but it's green, it's lush. Anything that grows anywhere in the world, you can grow it in Israel between the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River that runs down on the Dead Sea. The Sea of Galilee is a picture of life and just everything green and good and wholesome and yummy grows there. It's a wonderful place full of fish, birds, all sorts of stuff. You get to the Dead Sea and it stinks. It literally stinks because it's nothing but death. And there's a great Jewish explanation of this in the Talmud, that the reason why the Sea of Galilee is full of life is because not only does it take from the three headwaters of the Jordan River that flow into it, but it also gives. It shares. The water flows through it. It's constantly clean. It's constantly pure because it gives. It shares its abundance. The Dead Sea is the bottom of the world. It only takes. And because it only takes, it's about 6 times saltier than the oceans. And nothing can live there. Nothing can live there. And I think that in that contrast, we live in that contrast. If we only take, relationships around us are going to die. Our finances we're never going to have enough money. It just doesn't work. But when we give, when we share, when we live into what God has called us to be, there is life, there is joy, there is peace, there is tranquility, there is everything good in that. And and I think it's so phenomenal. Jesus spent most of his earthly ministry right up around the Sea of Galilee in this beautiful, wonderful place. And if I was God and I got to pick anywhere to live, that's probably a really good spot to go for a lot of reasons, not just the weather. But he was baptized in the Jordan River just above the Dead Sea. So he who is life and is the life of the world took our sins on in that water, right? And it was washed down into the Dead Sea to die so that we can have life in him. Just amazing. And the power of giving, the power of simply living into what God has called us to do. And we owe it to our people to explain to them the blessings and the good that comes from this and in this particular part of life. Yes, sir.
One of the things, I'm Lutheran, one of the things that Lutherans lack is an ability to want to witness.
Okay, yeah, so Lutherans don't like to share Jesus. We like to hold Jesus. That's the whole Dead Sea of Galilee thing again, right?
We can't say anything like that. We certainly can't laugh or get too excited.
God forbid you clap in church.
Don't say amen.
Right? Don't do it. Hands up. Absolutely not.
Right in the hearts of most Lutherans.
Keep them in your pockets.
Either evangelism, at which point you can hear the air being sucked out of the room, or
Stewardship. Right.
Okay? And that's the attendance drop.
Right.
I find it interesting, we're sitting here in a math class, look at the key words, and I see Jesus on the left, and I see something else on the right. Add, sum, plus, both, and.
Oh, yeah.
All together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of people suffer from fear of a lack of abundance.
That fear.
They're afraid that if they give too much, if you picture yourself as a funnel, once God realizes you're going to distribute, he'll keep filling up your funnel.
Pick one. Yeah. Yeah.
Pick yours.
Yeah, right.
We're randomly choosing, okay? Randomly choosing. Which one you want? Pick one. Randomly choosing for books. All right, I'll take those two. And this is the one for the book that I don't have, which is the best book of them all. No pressure. All right, so lucky winners. What do you got? First book's going to be Dave Ramsey, Legacy Journey, goes to Gail Thomas. Congratulations. I didn't want to say your full name out loud because of fear that someone might know that you came to the stewardship talk. Giving It All Away goes to Tim from Washington. Tim from Washington. I won't mention your pastor.
Good.
The Spirituality of Fundraising book goes to Bo. We met on the way in. Congratulations, my friend. There you go. Easy read. Read it on the airplane home.
Only on the 14th.
Sandy gets God and Money. Sandy, Sandy, Sandy. Lucky winner, Sandy. Today's your day. Congratulations. And we have Kirk gets the Paradox of Generosity. Do you already have it? Well, now you do.
But go ahead, let's,
Congratulations.
let's, go ahead.
You can buy it on your expense account. Here, at least pick the next person then.
Okay.
You got to get something out of this.
Oh, they're sticking together.
I won't tell you how many I've expensed, by the way. It was more than one.
I know it.
Richard from Arizona. Say, look at that.
That's the one I wanted, actually.
And then who gets the best book of them all? Eva? Yeah, all right. So I'm going to need to get your address after this so that I can ship you the book when I get it. So, awesome. Well, thank you all so much. You've been a super great group to chat with. I'm going to close my stuff down here and move out into the hallway, but if anyone wants to chat later, we're glad to. I'd like to close this with a word of prayer, if you don't mind.
Thank you, by the way. It was very
Yeah.
enlightening.
Good. Thank you. Dear Father in heaven, again, thank you and praise you for today, for the last 73 minutes that we've been able to talk about the role of stewardship and our relationship with money and how it relates to you. We thank you for the wisdom of those who have gone before us, including Luther and many who have taught us. We pray that you would now fill us with your Spirit and with passion for you and for the people that you love, that we may be used mightily for the cause of your kingdom, that everyone here would be able to go back home and to share a little bit of what they've learned, that their congregation, the people they love, may continue to grow in stewardship or generosity or giving or whatever word it is that we want to use, so that we can serve you ever more effectively, investing in your kingdom, so that when we get to heaven and we see you face to face, we're going to get to meet many of the people that you use our finances, our time, our talent, and everything that we have to touch with the goodness of your love, so that we can forever celebrate and rejoice in how you have allowed us to serve you. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you all very much.